Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was raised in Themyscira beside Wonder Woman. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The azure sky of Themyscira was a perfect, unbroken canvas, mirroring the lapis lazuli waters that lapped gently against the ivory sands. The air, thick with the scent of salt and oleander, was disturbed only by the rhythmic crash of waves and the sharp, percussive sounds of combat. On the sun-drenched beach, two figures moved in a dance as old as the island itself. One was a goddess in motion. Princess Diana, her raven hair a silken banner whipping in the sea breeze, moved with a power that seemed to ripple the very air around her. Every strike was precise, every block immovable. She was grace and strength incarnate, a living embodiment of the Amazon's warrior spirit. Her opponent was a paradox. He was slighter, his frame lean and corded with wiry muscle, not the sculpted marble of his Amazonian sisters. His hair was a wild, untamable thicket of dark green, a stark contrast to the ebony, auburn, and blonde manes of the island's other inhabitants. Where Diana was a force of nature, he was a student of it, his movements economical, fluid, and deceptively quick. 14-year-old Izuku Midoriya ducked under a sweeping kick that could have felled an ancient oak, the wind of its passage tugging at his short-cropped hair. He didn't try to block it. He couldn't. Instead, he used the momentum of his dodge to pivot, his bare foot kicking up a spray of sand aimed directly at Diana's eyes. It was a simple, almost childish trick, but it was unexpected. Diana blinked, a fraction of a second's hesitation that Izuku exploited instantly. He surged forward, not with a punch, but with an open palm strike aimed at the inside of her knee. Simultaneously, his other hand shot out to hook her elbow, pulling her center of gravity forward while her leg buckled. It was a perfect application of pancration, the ancient art of wrestling and boxing he had drilled into his very marrow. For a glorious, fleeting moment, the princess of Themyscira was off balance. "Clever, little brother," Diana grunted, her voice a low rumble of amusement and approval. But a demigoddess, even off balance, was still a demigoddess. She corrected her stance with impossible speed, her free hand clamping down on Izuku's shoulder. Her grip was firm but gentle, a lioness catching a cub. The spar was over. Izuku sighed, the tension draining from his body. He looked up at his sister, his emerald eyes bright with thought, not frustration. "I almost had you," Diana laughed, a sound as warm and clear as a temple bell. She released him and ruffled his unruly hair. "You almost made me stumble, Alexandros." "There is a difference." He winced slightly at the Themysciran name. He didn't dislike it. Alexandros, defender of mankind, it was a name full of honor and purpose. But it always felt like a title he had yet to earn. "Please, Diana." "Just Izuku." "Izuku, then," she conceded with a smile that could calm storms. "Your technique was flawless. You saw the opening, you created a distraction, and you committed without hesitation. Philippus would be proud, but it wasn't enough." Izuku mumbled, already replaying the spar in his head. He began pacing, his fingers tracing patterns in the air as his mind worked. "The problem is the power differential. I can't match you in strength, so I have to rely on speed and leverage. But your reaction time is, well, it's divine. The window for a successful takedown is less than a millisecond. My attack on your knee was correct, but I should have anticipated your recovery. If I had dropped lower and swept your other leg instead of trying to control your arm." He trailed off, his muttering intensifying, a habit the Amazons had long since found both endearing and slightly baffling. Diana watched him, her expression softening. He was so different from them. They were warriors of instinct and passion, their skills honed by centuries of training. Izuku was a scholar of combat. He didn't just learn a technique. He dissected it, analyzed its physics, calculated its probability of success against a dozen different variables, and recorded it all in a series of leather-bound journals he kept hidden under his cot. "You're thinking too much again," she chided gently, placing a hand on his head to stop his pacing. "You felt the moment, and you acted. That is the heart of a warrior, but the mind of a warrior knows how to make the next moment better," he retorted, his gaze sharp. "Your left foot was turned 2 degrees too far outward when you launched that kick." It's what gave me the angle to attack your knee. If you were fighting Ares, that could have been a fatal flaw. Diana froze, her smile fading as she replayed her own movement. She shifted her weight, miming the kick, and her eyes widened in surprise. He was right. It was a minuscule, almost imperceptible flaw, one that not even her mother, the queen, would have likely noticed in a friendly spar. But Izuku had. By Hera's wisdom, she breathed, looking at her younger brother with a renewed sense of wonder. How did you see that? Izuku just shrugged, a blush creeping up his neck. The salt spray from a crashing wave misted his face, and for a moment, the taste reminded him of other tears, from a time long ago. A life he could barely recall, a dream of towering buildings made of glass and steel, of strange metal carriages, and of a woman with a smile as warm as Diana's and eyes the exact same shade as his own. A memory, sharp and painful as a shard of glass, pierced the placid calm of his Themysciran life. 10 years earlier, the world was a cacophony of screams and grinding metal. 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya was pressed against the rough brick of an alley wall, his small body trembling uncontrollably. Just moments before, he and his mother had been walking home from the park, his hand clutching a new, limited edition All Might action figure. He'd been chattering excitedly about the hero's latest daring rescue, the one where he'd stopped a collapsing bridge with his bare hands. You see, Mama? He'd said, his voice full of childish certainty. He saves everyone with a smile. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be a hero just like him. His mother, Inko, had looked down at him, her gentle face beaming with love. I know you will, my sweet Izuku. You are already my hero. Then the world had exploded. A villain, a monstrous creature of tar and malice with glowing red eyes, had burst from a sewer grate. It wasn't a thinking being. It was a force of pure destruction, lashing out at everything in its path. Heroes were on the scene in an instant, but they were struggling to contain the amorphous beast. In the chaos, Izuku and his mother were separated from the fleeing crowd, trapped in a narrow alley. The villain, seeing them, had surged forward. There was no time to run, no time to think. Inko did the only thing a mother could. She became a shield. She threw herself over Izuku, her arms a protective cage, her body absorbing the horrifying impact as the sludge monster slammed into them. He felt the sickening thud, heard her sharp, pained gasp. It's okay, Izuku, she whispered, her voice strained, wet. Everything is going to be okay. Mommy loves you so much. Never, never forget. Her body went limp. Through the gaps in her arms, Izuku saw the monster rear back for another attack. He saw the heroes, too far away. He saw his all-might toy, crushed and forgotten on the grimy pavement. He squeezed his eyes shut, a single, piercing wail of terror and grief tearing from his throat. He was going to die, but death did not come. Instead, a strange warmth enveloped him, a feeling like sinking into a hot bath. A brilliant light, golden and serene, pulsed from an unseen source. The alley, dark and grimy, was suddenly illuminated. At the loom of fate, in a place beyond mortal comprehension, 3 ancient sisters paused in their work. Clotho, who spins the thread of life, Lachesis, who measures it, and Atropos, who cuts it. They looked down at the tiny, vibrant green thread that was Izuku Midoriya, a thread that was about to be prematurely snipped. But there was something about this thread. It shone with a potential so pure, so bright, it seemed to hum with its own power. It was intertwined with another, a thread of brilliant gold that represented the legacy of a great hero. To cut it now would be to unravel a tapestry of hope they had not seen in ages. Atropos stayed her shears. Not this one. And so, divine will, nudged by the fates and warmed by Hestia's compassion for a mother's ultimate sacrifice, intervened. The world outside the alley seemed to fade away. The roar of the monster and the shouts of the heroes were replaced by the gentle sound of the ocean. The grimy brick wall dissolved into mist. A wave, not of water but of pure, shimmering energy, washed through the alley. It didn't harm Izuku, it cleansed him. It lifted him, cradling him gently, pulling him away from the body of his mother, away from the monster, away from the world of men that had failed to protect him. He was adrift in a sea of soft light and quiet sorrow, his consciousness fading as the magical current carried him across dimensions, across realities, to a place hidden from the eyes of mortals. a place of myth. When Izuku next opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the impossible blue of the Themysciran sky. He was lying on soft, warm sand. The air smelled clean, a world away from the city's smog. He pushed himself up, his small body aching. He was alone. "Mama?" he called out, his voice a tiny, hopeful squeak. "Mama!" Panic began to set in as he scrambled to his feet, turning in a frantic circle. He saw the turquoise sea, the white beach, and beyond that, a lush green forest and the distant gleam of white marble architecture. It was beautiful, but it was alien. It wasn't home. The sound of hoofbeats and booted feet on sand made him freeze. From the line of trees emerged a group of women unlike any he had ever seen. They were impossibly tall, clad in gleaming bronze armor, carrying spears and swords. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp and assessing. At their head was a woman of regal bearing, her long black hair braided with gold. This was Queen Hippolyta. Beside her, a hardened warrior with a scar across her cheek, General Philippus, rested a hand on the pommel of her sword. "By the gods!" Philippus breathed, her voice tight with disbelief. A male child," Hippolyta corrected, her eyes narrowed. She dismounted her white steed and approached cautiously, her every movement radiating authority. "How is this possible? No man has set foot on this island in 3 millennia. Izuku shrank back, tears welling in his eyes. He didn't understand their words, spoken in an ancient Greek dialect, but he understood the suspicion in their tones. He was small, alone, and surrounded by giants. From the back of the group, another figure emerged. A woman with an ethereal air, her eyes distant as if seeing things others could not. Menelip, the oracle. She raised a hand, silencing the murmurs rippling through the warriors. "Do not be so quick to judge, my sisters. The prophecies of Hera have long foretold this." Hippolyta turned to her. "Speak, Menelip. What prophecy?" The oracle's voice was like the rustling of leaves in a sacred grove. "When the world of men teeters on the precipice of its own making, when their self-made powers threaten to burn their world to ash, a son of man with the heart of a god shall walk upon our shores. He is not a conqueror, but a harbinger. He will be the bridge between our worlds, or he will be the breaking." A heavy silence fell over the Amazons. Philippus's hand tightened on her sword. "A harbinger of change. Change is not always welcome, Oracle. The last time man's world interfered with ours, it brought slavery and sorrow. This child could be a Trojan horse, a seed of destruction sent by our enemies." "He is a crying child, Philippus, not a hoplite army," another Amazon countered. The debate began to swell, a mixture of fear, suspicion, and curiosity. Hippolyta held up her hand for silence, her gaze fixed on the trembling boy. The prophecy weighed heavily on her. Her duty, first and foremost, was to protect her people and her island. A male child, a harbinger of unknown change, was a risk she could not easily calculate. Izuku, overwhelmed by the strange words and the intense stares, finally broke. A gut-wrenching sob escaped him, and he sank to his knees in the sand, burying his face in his hands. "I want my mama!" he wailed, the universal language of grief cutting through the political tension. The sound shattered the Amazon's warrior composure. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak, a sound no one on this island of immortals had heard for an eternity, and it was a sound that one Amazon could not ignore. A young girl, no older than 10 by mortal standards, pushed her way through the towering warriors. She had the same raven hair as the queen and eyes that held the wisdom of ages yet the compassion of youth. Princess Diana, daughter of Hippolyta, had been watching from the back, her heart aching for the small, weeping creature. She ignored the shocked gasps of her sisters and the stern look from her mother. She walked directly to Izuku and knelt in the sand before him, bringing herself to his level. The other Amazons saw a potential threat, a political problem, a prophetic puzzle. Diana saw a little boy who was hurt and alone. Izuku felt a gentle touch on his shoulder and looked up. He saw the girl's face, her expression one of profound kindness. Then she spoke, and for the first time since he'd woken up on this strange beach, he heard words he could understand. "It's all right," she said, her voice soft and melodic. The divine gift of the Altum allowed her to speak his native Japanese as if it were her own. You are safe here. No one will harm you. Izuku stared at her, his sobs hiccuping in his chest. Where's my mama? He whispered, his lip trembling. Diana's heart broke. She could feel the truth of his loss, a cold, empty space where a mother's love used to be. She didn't offer false platitudes or empty promises. She offered the simple, unvarnished truth, wrapped in compassion. She is gone, Diana said gently, her thumb stroking his tear-stained cheek. But her love brought you here. It made a miracle to keep you safe. The boy's face crumpled again, but this time, when he cried, he leaned into her touch. Diana wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as he wept for the mother he would never see again. The Amazons watched in stunned silence. Their fierce princess, the future of their people, was cradling a male child as if he were her own. After a long moment, Diana looked up, her gaze meeting her mother's. Her eyes, usually so bright and youthful, held a fire of fierce determination that Hippolyta had not seen before. Mother, Diana said, her voice ringing with conviction, her arms still protectively around the boy. Menelaus speaks of a harbinger. Philippus speaks of a threat. I see only a child who has lost everything. The gods did not send him here to be judged, but to be protected. This was their will. Daughter, you do not understand the complexities. Hippolyta began, her voice strained. I understand that our sacred duty is to champion justice and protect the innocent. Diana interrupted, rising to her feet and pulling Izuku up with her, keeping him tucked safely behind her legs. Is there anyone in this world more innocent than him? If we turn him away, or treat him as a prisoner, then we are no better than the cruel world of men you so despise. She squared her shoulders, looking every inch the queen she would one day become. He is not an omen. He is a child. And from this day forward he is my brother. I will care for him. I will train him. I will protect him. He is under my sworn protection. If you wish to cast him out, you must cast me out as well. The ultimatum hung in the air, as sharp and shocking as a thunderclap from a clear sky. Philippus looked aghast. Menelaus bowed her head, a small smile on her lips. Hippolyta stared at her daughter, seeing not a defiant child, but a woman stepping into her destiny. She saw the unwavering love in Diana's eyes, a love so pure and powerful it felt like a divine mandate in itself. She saw the prophecy not as a threat, but as a test. A test of their compassion, their principles, their very soul. And her daughter had just shown them the only way to pass. The queen's stern expression finally softened, a deep, weary sigh escaping her lips. She walked forward and knelt, her royal gaze falling upon the sniffling boy hiding behind her daughter. What is your name, child? She asked, her own voice magically shifting to his tongue. He peeked out, intimidated by her regal presence. I Izuku. Hippolyta nodded slowly. Izuku. A name from a world we do not know. Here you will also have a name of Themyscira, a name to mark your new beginning. She considered him for a moment, seeing the flicker of courage behind his fear, the echo of the mother's love that had saved him. We shall call you Alexandros. It means defender of mankind. You will be raised as a son of Themyscira, alongside my daughter. She rose and looked at the assembled Amazons, her voice once again booming with royal command. The boy, Izuku Alexandros, is to be welcomed. He is the ward of Princess Diana, and by extension, the ward of this island. He will be taught our ways, he will learn our history, and he will be treated with the respect due to one who was brought here by the will of the gods. Is that understood? A chorus of, Yes, Queen Hippolyta, rang across the beach, a mixture of reluctance, acceptance, and awe. Diana beamed, her relief palpable. She squeezed Izuku's small hand. Did you hear that, Izuku? You have a home now. You have a family. Izuku looked from the queen, to the army of warrior women, and finally to the kind-faced girl who held his hand. He didn't understand everything that had just happened. He didn't understand prophecies or politics. But he understood the warmth of the hand in his. He understood the safety in the girl's smile. He was a boy who had lost his world. But in its place, he had been given an island of legends. He was a son of man, adrift and alone, who had just been adopted by a family of goddesses. And though his heart ached with a sorrow that would never truly fade, as he looked up at his new sister, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to take root in the fertile soil of Paradise Island. The prophecy had begun. 10 years is but a blink to an immortal Amazon. It is the time it takes for a sapling to mature, for a cliff face to be gently reshaped by the sea, for the stars to complete a fraction of their celestial dance. But for a mortal boy, 10 years is a lifetime. It is the span between a lost child and a young man, between utter helplessness and honed lethality. For Izuku Midoriya, it was the time it took for the fires of Themyscira to forge him into something entirely new. The process began not with glory, but with failure. At 7 years old, he was a whisper of a boy, all sharp elbows and knobby knees, lost in the shadow of the colossi who were his sisters and mentors. His first lesson with Philippus in the main training arena was a masterclass in humiliation. The task was simple: lift a standard bronze Xiphos, a short sword, and hold a basic defensive stance. The other Amazon girls, some younger than him, hefted their blades with ease. Izuku wrapped both his small, freckled hands around the leather-bound hilt, grunted, and managed to raise the point a few inches from the ground before his arms trembled and he dropped it with a clang. Laughter, quickly stifled but not unheard, rippled through the younger trainees. His face burned with a shame so hot it brought tears to his eyes. He fled the arena, hiding in a small, secluded grove of olive trees, the same place he went whenever the weight of his otherness became too much. He was the only boy. The only one with green hair. The only one who got tired, who got sick, who bled and bruised so easily. The only one who couldn't lift the sword. He was practicing with a fallen branch, mimicking the stances he'd seen with a ferocious, tearful determination, when a shadow fell over him. It was Philippus, her scarred face impassive, her bronze armor glinting in the dappled sunlight. Izuku froze, expecting a reprimand. "You are not an Amazon boy," the general stated, her voice flat and hard as whetstone. It wasn't an insult, it was a fact. "Our blood is blessed by the gods. We are born with strength you will never possess. Trying to match it is like a fish trying to climb a mountain. It is a fool's errand, and it will get you killed." Izuku's shoulders slumped. "I know. Knowing is not enough. You must understand," Philippus continued, her gaze unwavering. She pointed a single, callous finger at him. "Your body is your weakness, therefore your mind must be your greatest weapon. An Amazon meets force with greater force. You will meet force with misdirection. She will use her strength, you will use hers against her. Come." She led him not back to the arena, but to a quiet, grassy clearing by a stream. She stood before him, a giant of a woman. "Attack me," Izuku hesitated. "But attack me," she commanded. He swallowed his fear and charged, throwing a clumsy punch at her waist. Philippus didn't move. She simply let his fist connect with her armored side. It was like punching a marble statue. A jolt of pain shot up Izuku's arm, and he stumbled back, cradling his throbbing knuckles. "That was foolish," she said without a trace of pity. "You used your weakness against my strength. Now think. Where is an Amazon's strength? In her arms, her legs, her core. Where is her weakness?" Izuku, rubbing his hand, thought about it. "She has to move. To attack. She has to have balance." A flicker of approval in Philippus's eyes. "Precisely. An object in motion has momentum. A warrior in motion has commitment. Use that. Do not stop my fist. Redirect it. Do not block my kick. Evade it and use the opening it creates. Your strength is not in the blow you land, but in the blow you make your opponent miss." Again, for the next hour, she attacked him. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed. He didn't land a single blow. He was knocked down, pushed around, and tripped until every part of his body ached. But with every failure, a lesson was imprinted. He stopped trying to be a wall and started trying to be a river, flowing around the unmovable rock that was Philippus. Finally, as she lunged with a simulated spear thrust using a long branch, Izuku didn't try to block or dodge. He dropped, letting the branch whistle over his head, and in the same motion, hooked his small leg around her ankle. He put his entire body weight into the pull. It wasn't enough to topple the general, not by a long shot. But for the first time, Philippus's foot shifted. She had to take a half step to steady herself. She was forced to react to him. She stopped and looked down at the boy, who was panting on the ground, covered in dirt and sweat. A rare, thin smile touched her lips. Good. The fish has learned it cannot climb the mountain. Now, I will teach it how to divert the river that flows from it. Your training begins now, Alexandros. That single lesson became the foundation of his entire existence. His body was a tool, but his mind was the forge, the body. His physical training was a brutal, eclectic curriculum designed for a body of mortal limits. Diana taught him the grace and acrobatics of their sparring, showing him how to turn a fall into a roll, a leap into a spinning kick. He spent months on balance beams, high wires, and crumbling ruins, until the rugged Themysciran landscape became his playground. He could move through the forest with a silence that startled even the most seasoned Amazonian hunters. Artemis, the stern, silver-haired master of the hunt, took him under her wing. She was a woman of few words, who believed in learning by doing. She didn't teach him archery. She handed him a yew bow and a single arrow and pointed to a gull circling high overhead. A weapon is an extension of the will, she said, her voice crisp as autumn leaves. If your will is scattered, your arrow will be also. Find your center. See the target not as it is, but where it will be. Account for the wind, the pull of the earth, the breath in your own lungs. Do not think. No, for a year, he never hit a thing. His arrows went wide, fell short, or sailed off into the sea. He grew frustrated, angry at his own limitations. But he never gave up. He would spend entire days on the cliffs, observing the wind, feeling its subtle shifts on his skin. He studied the flight patterns of birds, the arc of a thrown stone, the physics of trajectory. He filled pages of his journals with diagrams and calculations. Then one day, at age 11, he stood on the cliff edge. A storm was rolling in, the wind a turbulent, unpredictable force. Artemis stood beside him, impassive. A true archer can use the storm to his advantage, she said. There. The highest branch of that cypress, on the far ridge. A single leaf, it was an impossible shot. The distance was immense, the target minuscule, the wind a howling gale. Izuka closed his eyes. He didn't fight the wind. He listened to it. He felt its push and pull. He drew the bowstring back, his breathing slow and even, his body a statue against the gale. He aimed not at the leaf, but at a point 20 feet to the left and 10 feet above it. He held the position, waiting, feeling the rhythm of the gusts. He felt a momentary lull, a shift in the current. He knew. He released. The arrow flew, a tiny speck against the bruised purple sky. The wind caught it, and for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed to be blown completely off course. But then, a crosswind caught it again, correcting its trajectory in a perfect, impossible arc. The arrow spun, stabilized, and struck the cypress tree, pinning a single, trembling green leaf to the bark by its stem. Artemis said nothing. She simply placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the highest praise he had ever received from her. From then on, his archery became legendary. He could ricochet arrows off shields, pin a fly to a wall without harming it, and fire 3 arrows in the time it took another to knock one. He wasn't as strong as his sisters, but with a bow in his hand, he was just as deadly. The mind, while his body was being honed, his mind was being sharpened. The great library of Themyscira was his sanctuary. It was a cavernous marble hall, holding the accumulated knowledge of millennia, from the philosophies of Plato to the lost histories of the Atlantean wars. It was here that Izuka truly thrived. He devoured everything. He read of the Trojan War, not as myth, but as a tactical case study. He analyzed the strategies of Odysseus, the logistics of the Achaean army, the psychological warfare employed by both sides. He studied Sun Tzu, which had come to the island through a rare shipwreck centuries ago, alongside Roman military doctrines and Egyptian siege tactics. It was in the library, at age 10, that he found a stack of blank, leather-bound journals. An idea sparked in his mind, born from the fading memories of a hero-obsessed child and the burgeoning intellect of a warrior scholar. He began his own analysis. Warrior analysis for the future. His first entry was on Diana. He sketched her in her training armor, her stance powerful and open. His neat, precise handwriting filled the margins. Subject Diana, Princess of Themyscira. Style, aggressive, overwhelming. Relies on superior strength, speed, and durability. Primary weapons, gauntlets of submission, defensive, sword of Athena, offensive. Notable techniques. Shield bash to create openings, uses lasso to control distance and disarm opponents. Weaknesses, overconfidence. Tends to underestimate smaller, faster opponents. Footwork, while swift, can become predictable in prolonged combat. Can be baited into a reckless charge. Minimal focus on environmental exploitation. Conclusion: to defeat Diana, one must not engage her head-on. Use guerrilla tactics. Force her into an enclosed space to limit her mobility. Attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Target her balance, not her defenses. He filled journal after journal. He analyzed Philippus's mastery of the spear, her perfect defensive phalanx formations. He documented Artemis's stealth and range superiority. He studied every single Amazon, breaking down their styles, their strengths, their tells. He noted how one warrior always shifted her weight to her back foot before a lunge, how another's eyes would flicker to her target a split second before she struck. His muttering, once a childhood habit, became a tool of intense concentration as he observed sparring matches from the sidelines, his pen flying across the page. The Amazons grew used to the quiet boy in the corner, scribbling away, occasionally looking up with an unnervingly perceptive gaze. They thought it was a charming eccentricity. None of them realized he was creating the single most comprehensive tactical analysis of Themyscira's defenses that had ever existed. The heart, for all his training, a cold knot of insecurity remained lodged deep in Izuku's chest. He could outthink any Amazon, outshoot most of them, and outmaneuver all but Diana. But he was still mortal, he was still fragile. He was still the boy who couldn't lift the sword. This feeling came to a head when he was 12. A challenge had been issued, the Gauntlet of Atlas, a grueling obstacle course that tested strength, endurance, and will. It culminated in having to hold aloft a massive stone sphere for 60 seconds. It was a task designed for Amazon physiology. Izuku excelled in the early stages, his agility and problem-solving skills allowing him to navigate the traps and puzzles with record speed. But when he reached the final challenge, he failed. He strained, his muscles screaming, but he couldn't even budge the sphere from its cradle. He had to watch as every other participant, even the youngest Amazons, completed the task. The quiet pity in their eyes was worse than the laughter from years ago. That night, Diana found him on the cliffs overlooking the sea, his small frame silhouetted against the moonlit water. He was skipping stones across the surface with a grim, repetitive motion. "Your speed in the labyrinth of Daedalus was remarkable," she said softly, sitting beside him. "No one has ever solved the riddle of the moving walls so quickly." "It doesn't matter," Izuku said, his voice thick. "I failed the most important part. The part that requires strength. The part that makes you an Amazon. Being an Amazon is not about lifting a rock, Izuku, isn't it?" He shot back, his voice cracking. "You're all so strong. You're immortal. You're perfect. I'm just me. A weak, quirkless boy you found on a beach. I train every day, harder than anyone, and it's still not enough. I'll never be enough. I'll never be one of you." Tears streamed down his face, the confession he'd held in for 8 years finally pouring out. "I just want to be strong enough to stand beside you. To protect you. To be worthy of being your brother, but I can't. And I hate it." Diana listened, her heart aching for him. She didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, she stood up and held out her hand. Tucked into her belt was a familiar golden, glowing rope. "The lasso of Hestia. Come," she said. "There is one more lesson you must learn." She led him to the softly lit chamber of truth, a quiet sanctuary deep within the royal palace. In the center of the room was a simple, polished stone dais. "The lasso does more than compel others to speak the truth," Diana explained, her voice echoing slightly in the hallowed space. "Its greatest power is to help one understand their own truth, to face the fears and doubts we hide even from ourselves. It will not be easy." Izuku nodded, his jaws set. He was afraid, but he trusted Diana more than he feared anything. He stepped onto the dais, and she gently looped the glowing lariat around his shoulders. A warm, golden light pulsed from the lasso, suffusing his entire being. It was not a painful sensation, but it was overwhelming. It stripped away all his defenses, all the walls he built around his heart. He felt utterly exposed. "Now," Diana said gently, holding the other end of the rope. "Speak your deepest truth. Why do you train so relentlessly, my brother?" The words tumbled out of him, unbidden, shaped by the lasso's undeniable power. "Because I'm terrified," he whispered, the sound raw and honest. "I remember my mother. I remember being helpless. She died to protect me, and I couldn't do anything. I never want to be that helpless again. I train because if I stop, the fear will consume me. The fear that when someone I love is in danger, I'll be too weak to save them, just like before." The golden light of the lasso intensified. "And what is your greatest fear?" Diana asked, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "My greatest fear," he choked on a sob, "is that I don't truly belong here. That for all my training, I am still an outsider. A burden. A fragile mortal boy in a paradise of goddesses. And that one day, you will all realize it and leave me behind." He finally said it. The deepest, darkest poison in his soul, now brought into the light. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for Diana's judgment, for her pity. Instead, he felt her arms wrap around him in a firm, loving embrace. The lasso fell away, its light dimming. "Oh, Izuku," she murmured into his hair, holding him tightly. "Is that what you believe?" She pulled back, her hands on his shoulders, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Your fear of helplessness doesn't make you weak, it is the seed of your empathy. Your feeling of being an outsider doesn't make you a burden, it is what fuels your incredible drive to be better. You see the world differently than we do, and that is not a weakness. It is your greatest strength." She tapped a finger to his temple. "Philippus can break a boulder with her fist, but you can see the single flaw that would make it crumble. Artemis can hit any target she can see, but you can calculate the path to a target that is hidden. I can fight a hydra, but you can devise the strategy that would allow an entire army to defeat it." She smiled, a brilliant, radiant expression of pure love. "You are not one of us, Izuku. You are right. You are more. You have the heart of the finest Amazon, the mind of the greatest scholar, and the spirit of the most courageous human. You are not our burden. You are our hope. You are my brother. That is the only truth that matters." In that moment, something inside Izuku shifted. The knot of insecurity didn't vanish entirely. It was a part of him, a scar from a life ago, but it loosened its suffocating grip. He saw himself, for the first time, not as a collection of deficiencies to be overcome, but as a unique combination of strengths. He was the son of two worlds, forged by the tragedy of one, and tempered by the love of another. He left the chamber that night taller, not in stature, but in spirit. The final piece of the forge was in place. His body was a weapon, his mind was a strategist, and now, his heart understood its own truth. He was ready, and as he stepped back out into the moonlight, a young man of 14, he looked out at the vast, dark ocean that separated Themyscira from the world of men. He was no longer afraid of what lay beyond it. For the first time, he was curious. He was the island's son, but his Themysciran name was Alexandros, defender of mankind. And mankind, he knew, was not on this island. His destiny, he was beginning to understand, lay somewhere out there, across the wine-dark sea. The nights on Themyscira were sacred. When Hecate's moon cast its silver light upon the marble temples and slumbering olive groves, a profound peace settled over the island. It was a silence woven from the gentle song of cicadas, the distant sigh of the sea, and the weight of peaceful millennia. On this night, Izuku and Diana lay on their backs atop the highest point of the royal palace, the celestial sphere a breathtaking tapestry of diamond dust above them. Here, unpolluted by the artificial lights of a world he barely remembered, the stars were living things. Artemis says that the brightest star in the Hunter's Belt is a blue supergiant, thousands of times more luminous than our sun, Izuku murmured, tracing the constellation with a finger. She says it will one day collapse and explode in a supernova, a celestial event so powerful it would be visible from here even in daylight. And Menelip says it is the soul of a fallen hero, placed in the heavens by Hera as a reward for his valor. Diana countered, her voice a soft, musical hum. A reminder that even in the deepest darkness, a single light can guide the way. Izuku smiled. I like both explanations. He fell silent for a moment, the vastness of the cosmos sparking the ever-present question in his mind. Diana, do you ever wonder what's out there? Beyond the veil? Diana turned her head, her dark hair pooling on the cool marble. I know what is out there. A world of men. A world that turned its back on the gods, that embraced war and chaos. Mother has told us the stories, but the stories are ancient. Izuku pressed gently. A lot can change in 3,000 years. The shipwreck scrolls in the library. They speak of different kinds of nations, of technologies that sound like Hephaestus's wildest dreams. They speak of a world that is growing. His longing was a quiet, persistent ache. He loved Themyscira with every fiber of his being. It was his home, his haven. It had given him a family, a purpose. But it was not the world he was born into. Faint, dreamlike wisps of memory still haunted him. The taste of something sweet and cold called ice cream, the roar of metal beasts on black rivers of stone, the image of a towering man with a blinding smile. He knew, instinctively, that his name, Izuku Midoriya, belonged to that other world. Growth is not always progress, little brother, Diana said sagely. A weed grows quickly, but it chokes the life from the flowers. Before Izuku could reply, their peaceful debate was shattered. It began as a low, unfamiliar hum, a dissonance in the perfect harmony of the night. It grew rapidly, swelling into a piercing, agonized shriek that tore through the sacred silence. It was a sound of violation, a sound of physics being brutalized. The scream of tortured metal and furious, contained fire. Both of them shot to their feet, their eyes scanning the sky. They saw it in the same instant, a falling star, but one that was horribly wrong. It was not a silver point of light arcing gracefully across the heavens. It was a burning, jagged scar of orange and black, trailing a plume of thick, oily smoke. It was moving impossibly fast, tumbling end over end, growing larger with every terrifying second. By the gods! Diana breathed, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of the ceremonial dagger at her belt. The object hurtled past the moon, and for a brief moment, its shape was illuminated, a sleek, sharp-angled bird of prey made of a dark, non-reflective metal, with wings that did not flap. One of those wings was mangled, torn, belching flames. It was going to crash. Alarms began to ring across the island, deep, resonant horns that had not been sounded in centuries. The Amazons were mobilizing. From their vantage point, Izuku and Diana could see bronze-armored figures pouring from the barracks, spears and shields glinting in the moonlight. The metal beasts slammed into the island's northern jungles, miles from the city of Themyscira. The impact was apocalyptic. A blinding flash of white light bleached the sky, followed a second later by a deafening boom that shook the palace to its foundations. A mushroom cloud of fire and earth roiled into the night, painting the underside of the clouds a hellish, flickering orange. Stay here! Diana commanded, her princess demeanor replaced by the sharp authority of a warrior. No! Izuku shot back, his mind already racing, calculating trajectories, potential survivors, containment perimeters. I'm coming with you. We don't know what that is. Diana looked at his determined face, saw the fire in his eyes that matched her own, and nodded. With me, then. But do exactly as I say. They moved with a practiced, symbiotic grace, leaping from rooftops and vaulting over garden walls, their progress far swifter than the marching columns of warriors below. The smell of smoke and burning fuel grew stronger, an acrid, chemical stench that was utterly alien to the island's pristine air. When they reached the crash site, it was a scene of utter devastation. A massive trench had been carved through the jungle, ancient trees splintered and thrown aside like kindling. At the end of the scar lay the source, a mangled husk of black metal, glowing cherry-red in places, embedded deep in the earth. The air shimmered with heat. A perimeter had already been established. Philippus was at the forefront, her shield raised, her face a grim mask of suspicion. It is a machine of war from man's world, she declared, her voice ringing with certainty. A new Trojan horse sent to breach our shores. There may be a survivor, Diana said, her eyes scanning the wreckage. A pilot. If there is, he is an invader, Philippus countered, her knuckles wide on her spear shaft. And will be treated as such. It was Izuku who saw it first. His eyes, trained to spot the smallest detail, noticed a break in the machine's canopy, a bubble of some transparent material, now shattered, and near it, a splash of crimson against the dark earth. There, he said, pointing. Someone was thrown clear. He darted forward before anyone could stop him. Diana was a half-step behind, her shield up to protect them both. He skidded to a halt beside a crumpled figure lying 20 yards from the main wreckage. It was a man, tangled in the straps of a strange harness, his flight suit torn and bloodied. He was older, his short hair graying at the temples, his face etched with lines of exhaustion and pain. He was unconscious, a nasty gash on his forehead bleeding freely. The Amazons surrounded him, their spear points lowered, a cage of gleaming bronze. "He is alive," Diana announced, kneeling to check his pulse. "Weak, but alive. Then he can be questioned," Philippus said grimly. "Take him to the infirmary. Bind him. He is a prisoner," the man moaned, his eyelids fluttering. His eyes, when they opened, were a murky, clouded gray. They flickered over the towering, armored women, the spears, the goddess-like face of Diana leaning over him. He blinked, a dry, rasping sound escaping his lips. "Guess I didn't make it to Valhalla," he croaked, his voice thick with a language none of the Amazons recognized. It was the clipped, modern Japanese of Izuku's forgotten childhood. Figures. Always knew I'd end up in the other place. He coughed, a racking, painful sound, and passed out again. The Amazons looked at each other in confusion. Diana, however, understood every word, thanks to the all-tongue. She looked at Izuku, whose face was a mask of intense concentration. He had understood, too, the words, the accent. It was a key turning a lock in the deepest recesses of his memory. "He needs a healer," Diana said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Now, the pilot, whose name they learned was Kenji Tanaka from the insignia on his suit, was tended to in the Royal Infirmary. His broken bones were set with practiced efficiency, his wounds cleaned with herbal poultices that fought off infection with supernatural speed. He drifted in and out of consciousness for a full day, his fevered mutterings a strange mix of technical jargon and weary curses that only Diana and Izuku could comprehend. Hippolyta had posted a full honor guard outside his room. The arrival of the metal bird and its pilot had sent a tremor of anxiety through the island. The Queen herself was torn between the ancient laws of hospitality and the bitter lessons of history. On the second day, Tanaka was awake and lucid. He sat propped up against a pile of plush cushions, his arm in a sling, his head bandaged. His cynical eyes took in the white marble, the gentle sunlight filtering through a high window, and the three figures standing before him: Queen Hippolyta, in her regal finery, Princess Diana, a comforting presence at her side, and a strange, green-haired boy who watched him with an unnerving, analytical intensity. "So," Tanaka said, his voice still hoarse, "this is it. The island from the old myths. Paradise Island. Thought you were just a story sailors told after too much sake. Your presence here is a violation of our most sacred laws," Hippolyta stated, her Japanese perfect and formal, a gift she shared with her daughter. "You will tell us who you are, where you come from, and why you have invaded our home." Tanaka gave a short, humorless laugh. "Invaded? Lady, I was testing the JSF X-3 Kestrel, a next-gen stealth fighter designed for Quark user support. Had a catastrophic engine failure during a high-altitude test flight. I didn't invade you, I fell on you. There's a difference." The word made Izuku's breath catch in his throat. Quirk. It was a familiar sound, a ghost from his past. He remembered doctors, a missing joint in his toe, the sympathetic, pitying looks. Hippolyta's brow furrowed. "Quirk?" Tanaka stared at her, as if she just asked him what the sun was. "You really have been out of the loop. A quirk. A superpower. The thing that separates the normal folks from the people who can level a city block with a sneeze. 80% of the world has one. It's the next stage of human evolution, or so they tell us." He gestured to himself with his good hand. "I'm one of the unlucky 20%. Quirkless. A dying breed. That's why I fly the machines. Someone's still got to pilot the hardware." Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Quirkless. The word was a brand, a scar he had carried his whole life without fully understanding its meaning until this very moment. He wasn't just different from the Amazons. He was different from the world of men too. An anomaly in both. This world you speak of, Diana said, her voice gentle but firm. It sounds chaotic. Chaotic is one word for it. Tanaka grunted. You give everyone superpowers, you get super problems. We have heroes, licensed by the government, who fight the villains who use their powers for greed and destruction. It's a never-ending war, played out on the nightly news. A world choking on its own miracles. His gaze became distant, weary. We trade freedom for safety, and most days we don't get much of either. Hippolyta's face hardened. It is as I feared. Man's world has not changed. They have only found new, more terrible ways to wage their wars. She saw the confirmation of her deepest fears. Humanity was a race doomed by its own nature. But Izuku saw something else. He saw a world of wonders, of powers, of real-life heroes fighting real-life monsters. The fragmented memories of a childhood hero, a man named All Might, began to coalesce. He stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly. The heroes, who is the greatest among them? Is there a symbol of peace? Tanaka's cynical expression softened for the first time, a flicker of something akin to reverence in his tired eyes. So, some stories made it even to this place. He sighed, a long, heavy breath. Yeah, there's a symbol. There's All Might. Hippolyta, seeing the conversation slipping into channels she did not approve of, made a decision. Diana. The lasso. Diana hesitated, looking at the weary man, then at her mother's resolute face. She nodded and unhooked the golden lariat from her belt. The moment Tanaka saw it, he flinched. Hey, what is that? What are you doing? It will not harm you, Diana said, her voice soothing. It will only ask you to share the truth. She stepped forward and gently laid the glowing rope across his lap. A wave of golden energy washed over Kenji Tanaka. His body relaxed, the tension draining from his shoulders. The cynicism in his eyes was replaced by a profound, unguarded clarity. Tell us of your world, Hippolyta commanded. Tell us of these quirks. Under the lasso's compulsion, Tanaka began to speak. His voice was a monotone, but the words painted a vivid, terrifying, and beautiful picture. It began with a glowing baby, now it's the new normal. The power is everything. It defines you. A boy who can create explosions from his hands is destined for greatness. A girl who can manipulate gravity is a potential savior. A man who can turn his body to sludge, a monster. Your DNA is your destiny. We built a society around it. Schools to train the powerful, agencies to manage them, laws to restrain them, and prisons to hold those who break them. Izuku was scribbling furiously in a small journal he now carried everywhere, his hand flying across the page. This was more than history. This was the rulebook for a world he never got to know. Tell us of the conflict, Diana urged. The heroes and villains, it's an arms race of the soul, Tanaka said, his voice hollow. For every hero who rises, a dozen villains crawl from the shadows. Some want money, some want power. Some just want to watch the world burn. They have powers that can decay a man to dust, that can steal the powers of others, that can warp reality. The heroes fight them. They are celebrities, soldiers, saviors. They stand on a fragile wall, holding back an endless tide of chaos. Most of them are good people. Some are just in it for the fame. They are flawed, human. Izuku looked up from his notes, his eyes wide. Flawed heroes. It was a concept so different from the perfect paragons of Amazonian legend. It made them real. And All Might? Izuku asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tell us the truth about him. Tanaka's head bowed slightly, as if speaking the name carried a physical weight. The lasso around him glowed brighter. He is different, Tanaka said, his voice filled with a reluctant awe. He is not like the others. When he appears, the sky seems brighter. He is a mountain of muscle and optimism, with a smile that can banish fear. I've seen it. I was a young pilot, flying a rescue chopper over a disaster zone. A collapsing skyscraper. Hundreds trapped. The other heroes were failing. There was too much chaos, too much debris. We were losing people. He took a shuddering breath, the memory as clear as if it were yesterday. Then he arrived. It was like the sun bursting through the clouds. He wasn't just strong, he held up a collapsing section of the building with one hand and directed rescues with the other. He saved every single one of them. Every one. He did it all with that impossible smile. He's not a man, he's a living, breathing legend. He is the pillar holding up a cracking sky. Without him, without that symbol of peace, our whole society would have devoured itself years ago. He is hope, made flesh. The lasso's glow faded as Diana lifted it. Tanaka slumped back against the pillows, blinking, looking dazed and exhausted, as if he had just run a marathon. The room was silent, save for the frantic scratching of Izuku's pen. Hippolyta's face was pale. The world Tanaka described was a nightmare, a powder keg waiting for a spark. A world entirely dependent on a single man. Diana's expression was one of profound sorrow and steely resolve. She saw a world drowning, crying out for help. It was a cry she could not ignore. The core tenet of the Amazons, their sacred mission from the gods, was to bring peace and justice to the world of men. A mission they had long since abandoned in favor of isolation. She now saw that as a betrayal of their purpose. But Izuku saw something else entirely. His world had just been fundamentally reordered. The stories he'd read of Heracles, of Achilles, of Odysseus, they were no longer just ancient history. They were happening now. In the world he came from, and the greatest of these new heroes was a man named All Might. And in Tanaka's story, he'd heard the two most important words of his life, quirkless and hero. A man without power had described a man with ultimate power, and in the space between those two poles, Izuku's entire future suddenly snapped into focus. The desire to be a defender, to be worthy of his name Alexandros, was no longer an abstract concept. It had a face. It had a name. It had a smile. He had to go there. He had to see it. He had to learn from this All Might. He had to find a way, any way, to stand on that wall beside them. It was a calling so powerful, so absolute, it felt like a prophecy unfolding within his own heart. He looked up from his journal, his emerald eyes blazing with a light that startled even his sister. "I have to go," he said, his voice clear and steady. Hippolyta turned to him, her expression thunderous. "You will go nowhere, boy. You have heard the man. That world is a maelstrom of chaos. It is no place for you. It is my birthplace," Izuku stated, standing taller than he ever had before. "And it is the world you will help me save," Diana added, stepping to Izuku's side, her hand resting on his shoulder. She faced her mother, her regal bearing a perfect mirror of the queen's. "Mother, you have heard the truth. The world of men is teetering on a precipice. Our mission, our most sacred duty, has never been more vital. We have hidden here for long enough while the world suffered. It is time for an ambassador from Themyscira to return. It is time for Wonder Woman." Hippolyta's face was a mask of cold fury, but beneath it was a mother's terror. "I forbid it. I will not lose my only daughter to the madness of that world, and I will not allow the boy we saved from it to throw himself back into the fire. The prophecy said he would be a bridge or a breaking. I will not risk the breaking of our people. Hiding from your destiny is not the same as avoiding it, Mother," Diana said, her voice softening but losing none of its iron resolve. "The fates brought Izuku to us for a reason. This man's arrival is not a coincidence. It is a summons. A call to action. Our mission was never to hide, but to protect. And we cannot protect a world we refuse to be a part of." Hippolyta stared at the two of them, her perfect, goddess-born daughter and the strange, mortal boy she had come to love as a son. They stood together, a united front, their faces illuminated by the dawning sun streaming through the window. One was driven by divine duty, the other by a deeply personal, desperate hope. She saw the prophecy twisting into a shape she could no longer control. Her safe, predictable world was about to shatter. She had forbidden it. But as she looked into their unyielding eyes, she knew, with the chilling certainty of a queen who has lost a war before it has even begun, that it was a command they would not obey. The crash had not just brought a man to their shores, it had brought a calling. And it was a call that would lead her children away from paradise and into the heart of the storm. The departure was a schism, a quiet tearing of the fabric of Themysciran life. Queen Hippolyta stood on the highest marble pier, her face a mask of regal stoicism that failed to conceal the tempest in her eyes. She was not bidding farewell to an ambassador and her ward. She was watching her heart sail away into a world she despised. She had not forbidden their journey again. She knew it would be as futile as commanding the tide. Instead, she had armed them. Diana wore a new set of burnished bronze armor, lighter than her ceremonial garb but enchanted by Hephaestus himself to withstand the strange and terrifying weapons of man's world. At her hip hung the sword of Athena, a blade sharp enough to slice atoms, sheathed in a scabbard that would render it invisible to mortal eyes. Izuku, standing beside her, looked less like a warrior and more like a scholar on an expedition. He wore simple, durable linen trousers and a tunic, dyed a deep forest green. Strapped to his back was a custom-made quiver filled with arrows fletched with harpy feathers, and in his hand, he held a sleek, unadorned yew bow, a gift from Artemis. A leather satchel, already bulging with his journals and writing implements, was slung over his shoulder. He looked small and terribly mortal next to his radiant sister. Kenji Tanaka, now fully healed and looking profoundly uncomfortable in a borrowed Amazonian chiton, stood by the vessel that would be their transport. It was not his shattered kestrel. The Amazonian artificers, led by the brilliant Epion, had constructed a new craft based on his descriptions and the wreckage. It was a marvel of grace and power, a flying skiff shaped like a swooping falcon, forged from gleaming celestial bronze and powered by a contained lightning elemental. It was silent, impossibly fast, and utterly untraceable. The coordinates from Yuzurifu, Japan are locked into the navigational crystal, Tanaka said, avoiding the queen's gaze. It will guide us straight there. Hippolyta finally looked at Izuku, her eyes softening for a fraction of a second. Remember your training, Alexandros. The world you are entering does not value the things we have taught you. They will see your compassion as weakness and your intellect as a threat. Then she turned to Diana, placing her hands on her daughter's sculpted shoulders. You are the best of us, my daughter. You carry the hope and honor of our people. Do not let their world poison your heart. Do not let their cynicism tarnish your light. Show them the truth of the Amazons, but trust no one. Her grip tightened. Come home. I will, mother, Diana promised, her voice thick with emotion. She embraced the queen, a rare public display of affection that sent a murmur through the assembled Amazons. Izuku simply bowed his head in respect. Thank you for everything, my queen. He felt a pang of guilt, knowing he was the catalyst for this painful goodbye. Hippolyta merely nodded, her face once again an unreadable mask. As their bronze falcon lifted silently from the pier, ascending into the brilliant blue sky, Izuku looked down at the island that had been his entire world. He saw the white marble city, the lush green forests, the training arenas where he had bled and triumphed, the cliffs where he had learned to master the wind. He saw his sisters, an army of immortals, watching them go. He was leaving paradise, but as the island began to shrink, disappearing into the mystical veil that shielded it from the world, he felt not sadness, but a profound, terrifying, and exhilarating sense of purpose. He was going home to a place he'd never known. The transition was jarring. For hours, they flew over an endless, pristine ocean under a familiar, benevolent sun. Then, they crossed an invisible threshold. The very air changed. It grew thicker, hazed with a brownish-gray tint that stung Izuku's nostrils. The scent of salt and nectar was replaced by something acrid and metallic. Pollution, Tanaka explained grimly from the pilot's seat. Welcome back to the 21st century. Soon, the land appeared on the horizon. It was not the gentle green coastline of Themyscira. It was a sprawling, gray leviathan, a concrete and steel monstrosity that stretched as far as the eye could see. Towers of glass and metal pierced the sky like jagged, artificial mountains. A ceaseless, low roar, the collective hum of millions of lives and machines, reached them even thousands of feet in the air. As they descended towards a secluded, abandoned airfield Tanaka knew on the outskirts of Muzurifu, the world resolved into a chaotic, overwhelming tapestry of details. Rivers of metal carriages, cars, Izuku's mind supplied, flowed along blacktop channels, their engines a constant growl. Lights of red, green, and garish neon blinked and flashed even in the daylight. And the people. So many people. They swarmed the streets like ants, a rushing, faceless tide of humanity, each one a tiny story Izuku couldn't begin to decipher. Diana watched it all with a regal, analytical calm, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the side of the skiff. "It is so loud," she murmured, her senses, far more acute than a human's, being assaulted from every direction. "And the air, it feels wounded." She saw the grime in the alleys, the hurried, stressed expressions on the faces below, the way they avoided each other's eyes. She saw a world suffering from a deep, spiritual sickness. Izuku, however, was in a state of rapturous intellectual overload. His eyes, wide as saucers, darted everywhere, trying to absorb everything at once. He wasn't just seeing cars. He was analyzing their aerodynamics, guessing at their principles of propulsion based on the theories of Hero of Alexandria. He wasn't just seeing skyscrapers. He was marveling at the load-bearing structures, the sheer audacity of building something so tall that it seemed to defy the gods themselves. The power grid required to light a single one of those city blocks must be immense. He muttered, his hand already reaching for his journal. The energy generation must be centralized, likely some form of nuclear fission, unless they've mastered geothermal on a massive scale. And the public transport system. Look, Diana, a train! It runs on elevated tracks. The engineering is incredible. Kid, breathe, Tanaka said, bringing the skiff to a silent landing behind a row of crumbling hangars. You're going to give yourself an aneurysm. They disembarked, and the full force of the city hit them. The noise, the smells, the sheer oppressive presence of so much concrete. Tanaka had arranged for clothes to be delivered, a simple favor called in from an old contact. Diana looked magnificent and slightly out of place in a stylish but conservative dark blue dress, her powerful physique hinting at the warrior beneath. Izuku wore a simple pair of jeans and a green t-shirt that read Air Logistique in English, a detail he found endlessly fascinating. He had to be physically restrained by Diana from asking Tanaka about the history and economic impact of the global freight industry. Their first foray into the city proper was a trial by fire. Tanaka tried to explain the concept of money, handing them a wad of colorful yen. Diana, a princess accustomed to a society where all things were shared according to need, found the concept of transactional currency deeply illogical. So, if I wish for one of these sweet red fruits, she said, gesturing to an apple at a street vendor's stall, I cannot simply take it. I must give this man a piece of colored paper? Yes, Your Highness. Tanaka sighed for what felt like the 100th time. That's how it works. You give him the paper, he gives you the apple, but the paper has no intrinsic value. The apple provides sustenance. This seems a very poor trade on his part. The vendor was starting to look nervous. Izuku, meanwhile, had already paid for 3 apples, bowed respectfully, and was now analyzing the hybrid grafting technique of the Fuji apple strain. Their primary goal was to find a pro-hero agency, a place to start their inquiries about All Might. As they navigated the crowded streets, Izuku's analytical mind, trained to see patterns in combat, began to see them in the chaos of society. He saw the subtle social cues, the flow of pedestrian traffic, the unspoken rules of a world he was only just entering. Diana, on the other hand, saw the cracks in the facade. She saw a homeless man huddled in an alley, ignored by the passers-by. She saw a child crying, his mother yelling at him, her face a mask of stress. She saw the simmering aggression in the drivers locked in traffic. She felt the ambient thrum of a million anxieties, a stark contrast to Themyscira's deep, abiding peace. This world wasn't just loud, it was hurting. It was this perception that made her stop dead in the middle of a bustling intersection. Izuku and Tanaka, carried forward by the crowd, turned to see her standing perfectly still, her head cocked as if listening to a distant sound. Diana? What is it? Izuku asked, pushing his way back to her. Screams, she said, her voice low and dangerous. And the smell of ozone and fear. Before anyone could react, an explosion ripped through a street 2 blocks away. A wave of concussive force washed over them, followed by a shower of glass and the terrified shrieks of the crowd. Panic erupted. The river of people reversed course, a stampede of fear-crazed bodies. This way! Tanaka yelled, trying to pull them into a sheltered storefront. But Diana was already moving against the tide, a bronze-clad demigod wading through a sea of mortals. Izuku, after a moment's hesitation, was right behind her, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was it. The chaos Tanaka had described. The war between heroes and villains. His training was about to be tested. The scene was one of pure, destructive anarchy. A man who looked more like a walking scrap heap than a human was rampaging in the center of a wide commercial street. His body was a whirlwind of rusted girders, broken car parts, and jagged sheets of metal, all swirling around a cackling, wild-eyed man at the center. "Give me all your valuables, or I'll redecorate this whole street with your insides," the villain, who the news would later dub Shrapnel, screamed, launching a volley of hubcaps like discus blades that embedded themselves in the side of a bus. Two pro-heroes were on the scene, but they were struggling. One, a bulky man in a rhino-themed costume called Rhinoceros, was too slow. Every time he charged, Shrapnel would simply lift himself off the ground on a pillar of debris. The other hero, a slender woman named Pixie Flash with teleportation powers, was fast enough to evade the projectiles, but her quirk was limited to short-range blinks, and she couldn't get close enough to land a hit without being shredded. "His quirk is some kind of localized metal manipulation," Izuku muttered, pulling Diana into the relative safety of a recessed doorway. His mind went into overdrive, his fear sublimated by the pure, cold rush of tactical analysis. "He's pulling debris from that construction site at the end of the block. The range seems to be about 50 meters. He's chaotic, but not stupid. He's using the larger pieces as a shield and the smaller, sharper pieces as projectiles. The heroes can't find an opening." Civilians were pinned down, hiding behind cars and inside shops with shattered storefronts. A hail of bolts and nails rained down, preventing any escape. "We have to get those people out of there," Diana said, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "Agreed," Izuku said, his gaze sweeping the area. "The projectiles are flying in predictable arcs. The main danger zones are the direct lines of sight from the villain, but the alleyways, he can't see into them. If we can create a diversion, we can guide the civilians to safety." He looked at Diana. "A big diversion." Diana gave him a confident smirk. "I can be very diverting." She began to stride out into the open. "Wait!" Izuku grabbed her arm. "Your armor, the sword, people will see. Let them see," she said, her voice ringing with purpose. "They need to see that someone is here to help." She stepped out into the street. The afternoon sun caught her Themysciran armor, making her shine like a goddess of old descending to the battlefield. She was an image of impossible, mythic beauty and power amidst the modern squalor. Shrapnel stopped his cackling and stared. "Who the hell are you? Some kind of cosplay hero?" He gestured, and a rusty car door flew at her like a cannonball. Diana didn't even flinch. She raised her arms, crossed at the wrists, and the car door slammed into her silver bracelets of submission. There was a deafening clang and a flash of golden energy. The door, warped and crumpled from the force of its own impact, was blasted backward, tumbling through the air and crashing at the villain's feet. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The two pro-heroes stared, dumbfounded. "Now Izuku!" Diana yelled. That was his cue. While all eyes were on the magnificent new arrival, Izuku moved. He was a green-clad shadow, darting along the edge of the chaos. He didn't run towards the fight, but towards the trapped civilians. "Everyone, listen to me!" he shouted, his voice clear and commanding, honed by years of projecting across windy training fields. "Stay low and follow the walls. The alley to your left is a clear path. Go now!" Some hesitated, but the authority in his voice, combined with the spectacle of Diana effortlessly deflecting a storm of metallic debris, spurred them into action. He moved from group to group, a shepherd guiding his flock, his tactical mind identifying the safest routes. He pointed out danger zones, warned a family about a tottering sign, and hoisted a small child over a barrier, all while keeping one eye on the main fight. Shrapnel, enraged, focused his full power on Diana. A maelstrom of metal, a literal tornado of rust and steel, converged on her. She stood her ground, a bastion of calm in the hurricane's eye, deflecting every piece with impossible speed and precision. The air was filled with the sound of 1,000 ringing bells as shrapnel pinged off her bracelets. "He's getting sloppy," Izuku observed, directing the last group of civilians to safety. "He's throwing everything at her, not paying attention to his surroundings. He's exposed." He looked at Pixie Flash, who was watching in awe. "His weakness is his concentration," Izuku yelled at her. "He has to see his targets. If you can get behind him, you can take him down." The pro-heroine's eyes widened in realization. She gave Izuku a grateful nod and vanished in a flicker of light. Diana, seeing the civilians were clear, decided to end the fight. Her lasso of Hestia flew from her hip, a shimmering cord of gold. It wasn't aimed at the villain himself. It snaked through the air, whipping around the base of the debris tornado. With a powerful tug, she unraveled his shield, sending girders and metal plates crashing harmlessly to the ground. Shrapnel was left exposed, his eyes wide with terror. Before he could react, Pixie Flash appeared behind him, her teleport followed by a swift, precise chop to the back of his neck. The villain crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The last few pieces of metal clattered to the pavement. Silence descended upon the street, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. Diana stood over the defeated villain, her lasso coiling back to her hip, not a single scratch on her armor. The civilians began to applaud, a wave of cheers and relief. The two pro-heroes stared at her, then at the green-haired, quirkless boy who had just coordinated a civilian evacuation better than most seasoned rescue heroes. They had just witnessed something impossible, and from the end of the street, another figure watched. A colossal man with a familiar, blinding smile, who had arrived just in time to see the fight's conclusion. All Might, in his full hero form, lowered the hand he had raised to intervene, a look of profound astonishment on his face. The aftermath was a whirlwind of police reports, media frenzy, and official questions. Diana handled it with the regal grace of a seasoned diplomat, introducing herself simply as Diana of Themyscira, an ambassador from a long-isolated nation. She omitted the more mythological details. The focus, surprisingly, shifted often to Izuku. "And you, son," said a grizzled police detective, looking him up and down. "What's your quirk? Some kind of tactical analysis ability?" Izuku froze for a second, the old, familiar shame prickling at him. But then he remembered Diana's words in the Chamber of Truth. He remembered his training. He straightened his back and looked the man in the eye. "I'm quirkless, sir," he said, his voice steady. The detective's eyebrows shot up. The nearby heroes and officers who overheard him stared. A quirkless kid had just run into an A-list villain attack and directed the scene like a veteran. It was unheard of. It was at that moment that All Might strode over, his massive form parting the crowd. "A fine display of heroism from you both," he boomed, his smile so bright it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. He clapped a hand on Rhinoceros's shoulder. "Excellent work containing the scene, my friend." He winked at Pixie Flash. "A textbook takedown. Well done." He was a master, deflecting the media's attention, controlling the narrative. He then turned to Diana and Izuku, his smile softening slightly, his blue eyes holding a genuine curiosity. "I must say, I am incredibly impressed. Your power is astounding, madam. And your courage, young man, it is the very definition of what it means to be a hero. To run into danger to save others, without a power of your own, that is a rare quality indeed." He was looking directly at Izuku, and for a moment, Izuku felt as if the symbol of peace was looking straight into his soul. This was the man from Tanaka's stories, the legend made flesh. He was even more magnificent in person. "Perhaps you would allow me to thank you both properly, away from this commotion," All Might suggested, his voice lowering slightly. "I believe we have much to discuss." An hour later they were in a sleek, private lounge atop the Might Tower, the tallest building in the city. The view of Musitifa was breathtaking, but the atmosphere inside was tense with unspoken questions. The moment the door slid shut, the unthinkable happened. In a great cloud of steam, the mountain of muscle that was All Might deflated. He shrank, his costume sagging, until what was left was a skeletal, almost frail man with sunken eyes and sharp, angular features, who coughed a droplet of blood into his fist. Diana's hand flew to her sword, her body instantly shifting into a defensive stance in front of Izuku. Sorcery? No, nothing like that, I assure you. The man wheezed, holding up his hands. This is my true form. Please call me Tashinori Yagi. Izuku stared, his mind working faster than it ever had before. His hero, the pillar of the world, was this fragile, wounded man. The pieces clicked together in his head with an audible, terrifying snap. All the legends, Tanaka's testimony, and now this reality. It wasn't a contradiction, it was a puzzle. And he thought he had just found the final piece. Tashinori explained his story, the grievous injury he'd sustained 5 years prior from a powerful villain, the stomach he'd lost, the respiratory system in tatters. He explained the time limit on his hero form, how the symbol of peace was slowly, inexorably fading. I maintained the facade. He finished, his voice heavy with weariness. Because the world needs all might. It needs a symbol. But I am fading, and I am telling you this because you are clearly not of this world, and I sense you are not here merely by chance. Diana, her posture relaxing but her eyes still wary, explained their own story. She spoke of Themyscira, of their mission to reconnect with and offer aid to man's world, of their quest to understand the new age of quirks and heroes. Tashinori listened with rapt attention, his tired eyes widening at the mention of gods and immortals. He accepted it with a surprising ease. In a world of superpowers, what were a few Greek myths come to life? But throughout the entire exchange, Izuku had been silent. He wasn't starstruck anymore. He was observing, analyzing, connecting. He looked at Tashinori, at the way he favored his left side, even when sitting, the way his breathing was shallow. The way the steam had erupted from his body, not like smoke, but like a release of immense pressure. It's not just a time limit, is it? Izuku said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence. Tashinori turned to him, surprised. What do you mean, young man? Izuku stood up and began to pace, his muttering habit kicking in, but his words were clear and surgically precise. Your transformation. It's not just a simple quirk. A power like yours, the sheer physical force, it defies the law of conservation of energy. It has to come from somewhere. That steam, it's a pressure release. An energy bleed off. Your body, your real body, it's not a vessel for that power. It's a leaky container, barely holding it in. Tashinori's eyes widened. Izuku continued, pointing at the man's hollowed chest. The injury you sustained, it didn't just weaken you. It ruptured the container. That's why you have a time limit. Every time you transform, you're forcing an ocean of power through a fractured dam. It's tearing you apart from the inside, isn't it? That's why you bleed. It's not just a symptom of the old wound. It's a symptom of your power killing you. He stopped pacing and looked directly at the skeletal hero, his gaze not one of accusation, but of profound, heartbreaking empathy. All Might isn't just a hero, Izuku stated, his voice soft but certain. It's a legacy. A torch. A power that is passed down from one person to another. And you're the last of the line, aren't you? You're looking for a successor before the flame burns out completely. The silence in the room was absolute. Diana stared at her brother, stunned by his incredible deductive leap. Tashinori Yagi, the #1 hero, the symbol of peace, looked at the quirkless, green-haired boy from an island of myth. A boy who had seen through his bravest smile, past his mightiest form, and laid bare the tragic, desperate truth of his existence in less than an hour. He saw a perception that was sharper than any blade, an intellect that was a superpower in its own right, and a heart that had, in the midst of chaos, shown unwavering, selfless courage. In that moment, Tashinori Y's search, which he thought would take years, which he feared he would fail, was over. He wasn't just looking at a hero. He was looking at the future. The air in the luxurious penthouse lounge grew heavy, thick with the weight of a secret that had held the fate of a nation in its grasp for generations. Tashinori Yagi's sunken eyes were wide, not with fear or anger at being exposed, but with a profound, soul-shaking astonishment. He looked at Izuku as if the boy had just rewritten the laws of physics in front of him. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant, muted hum of Muzurifu, a city oblivious to the tectonic shift occurring in the room high above it. Then, Tashinori began to laugh. It was not the booming, heroic laugh of All Might. It was a wheezing, broken, and yet utterly genuine sound, a cackle that devolved into a racking cough, forcing him to press a handkerchief to his lips. When he pulled it away, it was spotted with fresh blood. "In all my years," he gasped, wiping his mouth, a strange, weary smile on his thin face. "No one has ever, not my closest sidekicks, not the greatest minds at UA, not even my own predecessor, no one has ever pieced it together like that. Not with such terrifying accuracy." He sank deeper into the plush sofa, looking not at a boy, but at a prodigy, a miracle of perception. "You are absolutely right, young Midoriya. About all of it." Diana, who had remained a silent, watchful guardian, took a half-step forward, her brow furrowed in concern. She placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, a silent gesture of both support and restraint. She didn't fully understand the specifics of what her brother had deduced, but she understood the gravity of the revelation. This pillar of a man was crumbling, and his power was not his own. "It is a sacred torch," Toshinori said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with the reverence of a high priest speaking of his god. "A power passed from one generation to the next, growing stronger with each transfer. It is a quirk that stockpiles power, a crystallization of courage and strength, passed on to combat evil. It is called One for All, One for All." The name hung in the air, resonating with a mythic weight that even Diana, a child of myths, could feel. Izuku was trembling. Not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of what he was hearing. His analysis had been an intellectual exercise, a connecting of logical dots. But the reality was a living legend, a saga. It was a story straight from the scrolls in the great library, but it was happening right here, right now, to him. "I have been searching," Toshinori continued, his gaze locked on Izuku, intense and unwavering. "Searching for a worthy vessel. Someone with the spirit of a true hero, not someone who craves power or fame, but someone who moves before they have time to think, because their body is compelled by the need to save others." He leaned forward, his bony elbows on his knees. "Today, on that street, I saw two kinds of heroes. I saw your sister, young Diana, a goddess of battle, whose power is a shield for the innocent. Her heroism is a magnificent, undeniable truth. It is a mountain. But then," his eyes shifted to Izuku, and they softened. "I saw you. I saw a boy with no power at all run towards the danger. Not with fists raised, but with his mind alight, his focus entirely on the helpless. You didn't fight the villain, you saved the victims. That, young Midoriya, is the rarest and truest form of heroism. It is the core, the absolute bedrock, of what it means to be a hero. The rest is just application of power." Izuku's breath hitched. Tears began to well in his eyes, hot and sudden. All his life, he had been defined by what he lacked. He was the boy who couldn't lift the sword, the mortal among immortals, the quirkless anomaly. He had worked tirelessly to compensate for that lack, to build a fortress of intellect and skill around the hollow space where a power should have been. And now, the greatest hero in the world was telling him that the empty space was, in fact, the most important part of him. "Young Izuku Midoriya," Toshinori said, his voice gaining a sliver of All Might's resonant power. He stood up, a frail man embodying a colossal legacy, and looked down at the 14-year-old boy. "I have been searching for my successor. And I have found him. I want to pass my power on to you. I want you to inherit One for All." The offer, the impossible, world-altering offer, struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed from his lungs. The room seemed to tilt, the breathtaking view of the city dissolving into a blur of light and color. His knees felt weak. It was everything. It was the answer to a prayer he'd stopped making a decade ago. It was the key to a door he believed was permanently sealed. The power to stand beside Diana. The strength to protect. The ability to become the hero he had dreamed of being as a small, forgotten child in another life. To be like All Might. The tears that had been welling in his eyes now streamed freely down his face. He didn't try to stop them. They were a torrent of 10 years of insecurity, of desperate striving, of a quiet, aching hope he thought he had buried. A choked, ragged sob escaped him, a sound of such profound, cathartic relief that it seemed to be pulled from the very depths of his soul. Yes, he whispered, the word barely audible. He tried again, forcing it past the lump in his throat. Yes. Of course. Please. He bowed his head, his whole body shaking, overwhelmed by the sheer, crushing weight of his dream coming true. Diana watched her brother, her heart aching with a complex mix of pride, joy, and a deep, unsettling apprehension. She saw his happiness, the purest she had ever seen, and it warmed her. But she also heard the truth beneath Tashinori's words. A leaky container. A fractured dam. A power that is killing you. She stepped forward, placing herself between the skeletal man and her weeping brother. Her expression was not hostile, but it was fiercely protective, the gaze of a demigod scrutinizing a mortal's dangerous gift. This power, this one for all, she said, her voice calm but with an edge of sharpened steel. You said it is passed on. Does the previous user lose it? Tashinori nodded grimly. It does not vanish at once. The embers remain. I can still use my form for a time. But once the torch is passed, the flame begins to fade. Eventually, I will be left as I am now, powerless. And you say it is a power that stockpiles? She continued, her eyes narrowing. Growing stronger with each user. Izuku is mortal. He does not have the blood of the gods in his veins as I do. What does such a power do to a body that was not born to wield it? Tashinori's gaze faltered for the first time. He looked down at his own frail form. It is a great strain, he admitted. The body must be a proper vessel. If it is not strong enough, the power will tear it apart. When I inherited it, I was already strong. But the power was less than it is now. For young Midoriya, he will have to forge his body into a steel chalice, or the power will shatter him like glass. He met Diana's intense stare. It will break his bones. It will tear his muscles. Mastering it will be an agony. He may be permanently crippled. He may even die. I will not lie to you. This is a dangerous, cursed power as much as it is a blessing. Diana's face hardened. She turned to Izuku, who was now looking up, his tears subsiding, his expression one of rapt attention. She saw the unwavering resolve in his eyes. He had heard the warnings, and they had not deterred him in the slightest. He accepts this burden? She asked Tashinori, though the question was aimed at her brother. I do, Izuku said, his voice now clear and firm, all traces of his earlier emotional breakdown gone, replaced by the quiet determination of a warrior accepting his station. Diana, you of all people should understand. The path to protecting others is never without sacrifice. Philippus taught me that. Artemis taught me that. You taught me that. If the price of being able to save someone is a broken bone, it is a price I will pay gladly. He looked at Tashinori. I accept your offer, Tashinori-san. And I accept the risks. Tell me what I must do. A brilliant, proud smile bloomed on Tashinori's face, a true all-might smile, even in his withered form. First, we must prepare the vessel. Tashinori's plan was simple, brutal, and quintessentially all-might. You're going to clean this entire beach. He stood with his hands on his hips, in his hero form, atop a mountain of rusted washing machines, broken refrigerators, and discarded furniture at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. For years, illegal dumping and ocean currents had turned this once beautiful stretch of coastline into a metallic junkyard. But why? Izuku asked, bewildered. He had expected grueling physical conditioning, combat drills, something akin to his Themysciran training. Heroism these days is all about flashy quirks and televised fights. All Might boomed, gesturing to the landscape of trash. But the true origin of heroism is volunteer service, to see a need and to fill it, without thought of reward. You will restore this beach to its former glory. This is a service to your community. He then deflated into Tashinori, coughing. Also, he wheezed, moving all this heavy, awkward junk without a quirk is the perfect full-body workout to strengthen every muscle group you have. We have 10 months until the UA High School entrance exam. That is our deadline. Izuku looked at the literal mountain range of garbage that stretched for hundreds of meters. It was an impossible task. It was Heracles cleaning the Augean stables. He felt a familiar flicker of self-doubt. It was too much. He couldn't possibly. An excellent plan, a new voice said. Diana stood on the crumbling sea wall, dressed in practical training clothes, her arms crossed over her chest. It addresses physical conditioning, civic duty, and mental fortitude all at once. However, your methodology is inefficient, Tashinori blinked. Inefficient? You are focused solely on building his muscles, Diana explained, leaping gracefully from the wall to land softly on the sand beside them. But as you said, this power is a torrent. A steel chalice is strong, but a rigid one will still shatter under a sudden, overwhelming pressure. It must also be flexible. It needs to expand and contract with the force. He needs more than muscle. He needs harmony. She turned to Izuku. Your Amazonian training will be the key. We will not abandon it. We will integrate it. And so began the most grueling and strangest 10 months of Izuku Midoriya's life. It was a fusion of two worlds, two philosophies of strength, with Izuku as the crucible. The mornings were all mights. Under the hero's watchful eye, Izuku performed the Herculean task of cleaning the beach. It was backbreaking, monotonous labor. He dragged refrigerators, hauled tires, and coiled kilometers of rusted cable. All Might had created a meticulous training regimen, the aim to pass, American Dream Plan, which pushed Izuku to his absolute physical limits, and beyond. He would collapse into the sand, muscles screaming, lungs burning, only for the symbol of peace to loom over him, shouting encouragement. Plus ultra! A true hero must push past their limits. Only 50 more washing machines to go, young Midoriya. The afternoons and evenings belonged to Diana. After the brutal physical exertion, her training was one of finesse, control, and spirituality. She would lead him to a quiet section of the clean beach for meditation. One for all is not a tool you pick up and put down, she would say, her voice a calming balm on his frayed nerves. It will be a part of you. A river of power flowing through your soul. You cannot command a river. You can only guide its current. Breathe, Izuku. Feel your own center. Know the vessel before you try to fill it. She taught him advanced Amazonian breathing techniques, ways to regulate his heart rate, to focus his mind, to feel the flow of energy within his own body. They practiced pancration not for combat but for flow, moving through the forms like a dance, teaching his muscles to work in perfect concert. Strength is not just in the bicep, she explained, correcting his stance. It is in the turn of the hip, the push from the ball of the foot, the tension in the core. The entire body must act as one. When you receive the power, you cannot just channel it into your arm. You must draw it from the earth, through your legs, up your spine, and unleash it as a single, unified force. Tashinori, watching these sessions from a distance, was fascinated. He had treated the inheritance of one for all as a purely physical transaction. His predecessor, Nana Shimura, had taught him to be strong enough to handle it. Diana was teaching Izuku to harmonize with it. The fusion of methods produced incredible results. Izuku's body, already honed by years of Amazonian training, transformed. The wiry, agile youth became a young man of lean, densely packed muscle. Scars, new and old, crisscrossed his arms and back. But the change was more than physical. The frantic energy that had always defined him was tempered by a deep, quiet calm. He was still a muttering analyst, but his eyes now held the serene focus of a master archer and the unshakable resolve of a hero in the making. Finally, on the morning of the UA entrance exam, 10 months to the day, it was done. Izuku stood atop the very last mountain of garbage, a rusted behemoth of a commercial freezer, and roared his triumph at the rising sun. Below him, the beach was pristine. The sand was clean and white, the morning light glinting off a calm, blue sea. He had not just moved a mountain, he had restored a piece of the world. Tashinori, in his hero form, and Diana stood on the sea wall, watching him. He did it, Tashinori said, a note of awe in his voice. He did everything I asked of him, and more. He was ready months ago, Diana replied, a proud, sisterly smile on her face. The rest was just for show. Izuku leaped down from his perch, landing gracefully on the sand. He was exhausted, sore, but radiating an energy that seemed to make the very air around him hum. All might, he said, his voice steady, his eyes clear. I'm ready, Tashinori smiled. I know you are, my boy. He plucked a single hair from his iconic golden forelocks. "No," he said, his voice taking on a strangely solemn, almost comical tone. "Eat this." Izuku stared at the hair. "Ha! To inherit my power, you have to ingest some of my DNA," Toshinori explained, a bit sheepishly. "It's how it works." Izuku looked at the hair. He looked at All Might's earnest face. He looked at Diana, who was trying very hard to suppress a laugh. He sighed, a long-suffering sound that was a decade in the making. He had wrestled with Amazons, trained with a goddess, and moved a mountain of trash. This, he supposed, was just one more surreal step on the path. He took the hair and, with a grimace, swallowed it. For a moment, nothing happened. He just stood there, looking vaguely disgusted. Then, he felt it. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a warmth, starting in his stomach and spreading through his veins like liquid sunlight. It was a gentle, humming current at first, a whisper of power. Then, the whisper grew to a roar. He felt 1,000 lifetimes of strength, a chorus of voices from heroes past, echoing in his soul. It was terrifying. It was magnificent. It was one for all, and it was now a part of him. Energy, pure and untamed, crackled through him. It was too much. The steel chalice, for all its forging, was about to overflow. He could feel it surging towards his limbs, threatening to erupt. "Izuku, breathe!" Diana's voice cut through the roaring in his head. "Center yourself! Do not fight it! Guide it! Draw it into your core! Hold it!" He closed his eyes, his knuckles white, his teeth clenched. He forced himself to follow her instructions, to use the meditation techniques she had drilled into him for months. He pictured the power not as a monster to be caged, but as a river. He wasn't the dam, he was the riverbed. He guided the raging current away from his arms and legs, coaxing it to pool in the center of his being, a swirling, incandescent sphere of pure energy. Slowly, painstakingly, the raging subsided. The visible crackle of power faded. He opened his eyes, panting, sweat pouring down his face. He felt full, brimming with a power so immense it felt like he was holding a star in his gut. Toshinori stared, utterly dumbfounded. He's controlling it. Without even trying to use it, he's containing it. Nana always said it felt like a constant storm inside her, but he looks almost at peace with it. Diana smiled. That is the Themysciran way. We do not conquer. We harmonize. Izuku took a deep, shuddering breath and looked at his hands. They looked the same, but they felt utterly different. They were no longer just the hands of a scholar and an archer. They were the hands that now held the hope of the world. "It's time," he said, his voice a quiet rumble of newfound power. "I'm going to be late for the exam."